Welcome to Think Tank, the Army Cyber Institute at West Point's podcast. At the Army Cyber Institute, we confront the Army's most critical cyber challenges. We engage across our government and with our allies to better understand how cyber is changing conflict, and reach out to academia and industry to bridge gaps and stimulate cyber research. We are here to engage you on the latest in cyber and information warfare. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. For today's podcast, we have Professor Rob Barnsby. He's a cyber law fellow at the Army Cyber Institute. Rob, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lisa.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you came to be at the ACI, your education, your career? We'd love to know more about you.
Yeah, I'm just thankful that you would have me here. And my story is fairly common one here at West Point, right? So I went to school here. My wife went to school here, and we met in airborne school. It was very romantic.
That's good. That's really romantic.
Did not start dating till after graduation, though, but that was over 20 years ago, so we've been married over 20 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you, as of last month. And so basically grew up in Connecticut. My thing was we came to see West Point in, I think, sophomore year, and I was like, who the heck would want to go to school there? But then seeing, my financial situation and, that sort of thing, I changed my mind a couple of years later and decided to come here. So I'm very pleased to have graduated in class of 96. Didn't have a ton of money, so we were able to go here and then start out in the Army and end up just getting a bunch of opportunities in the Army to go to school. So one of those things was law school at William & Mary. So I went to William & Mary Law School. And then Command and General Staff College, a JAG school, I had a degree that I got. So basically I was intelligence officer for 5 years and then law school for 3 and then JAG, Judge Advocate General, attorney for the Army for 12 years. Totaling 20. So I had 20 years, 0 months, 0 days, retired exactly on the day, and came to the ACI. So that's why I've been here 3 years since retirement. And so, as you know, I get to teach in the law department here, too. So it's sort of a natural fit on that. So it's not always cyber. It's sometimes constitutional law and some other things. And pleased to be with that great department. And I guess technically I'm also with the Lieber Institute, which is something they've started, which is really good. Shane Reeves started it. He's their deputy director. Basically bringing all these law scholars together to talk about issues on the law of war and to be the thought leader on that type of thing. So law of land warfare. Out of West Point, you cannot go straight JAG or cyber. Now you can, but you couldn't in those days, obviously. I went Intel, MI, did the law school, and then switched to JAG. So there's connections between Intel and cyber.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously,
yes.
As you know.
Yep. Signal and MI, usually a lot of those officers transitioned into cyber.
Right.
Yep.
And so when we look at authorities and that sort of thing, natural fit between sometimes you see folks like some of the exercises we've been doing. Some of these folks on the ground, they are the same person doing law enforcement, cyber, and intel, and they're wearing different hats every time. So from a legal perspective, that's interesting, right? What's their authority? Sometimes it's the same person, and it's a different authority that they're using. So that was fun with some of our exercises to sort of figure that out. So I am interested in that, but that's not my main area of research.
The cyber domain, it's constantly changing and we're learning as we go.
Right.
Some of these I feel like making things up or trying to come to an agreement as we continue to push forward in the future.
Right. And the law that applies is often, for me, in the international law realm, the UN Charter. The UN Charter was 1945. Most countries or states agreed to it. In fact, I think 195 or something. And that's where we still are. In terms of, has a state violated another state's sovereignty, and to what can we respond in self-defense, even for cyber attacks? So in other words, some people call for a new UN Charter, and others say, no, this is perfectly fine. We just have to figure out what is equivalent to an armed attack to which we can respond in self-defense in the cyber realm.
Do you think if we're ever going to come to an agreement, be able to decide if the UN Charter currently as it stands is good enough, or do we need to revise it, like you were just mentioning?
I have argued that it is good. I mean, it's good enough. It's not perfect because there's a gap intentionally in there, which is after World War II, a lot of the countries did not want to go back to war ever again. and they said you can't just choose when to go to war and claim that, self-defense unless you're the victim of an armed attack like 9/11. Then everyone sort of agreed, like, okay, you're responding to an attack. You're allowed to violate their sovereignty and target them. But the drafters back in the 40s said anything below that, maybe even a use of force or something that violates some sovereignty in the way that I said a minute ago, is wrong. It's an internationally wrongful act, but it's not enough to get us to war. So they hated war so much, so we're gonna wait only till an armed attack. Now, you could go through the UN Security Council and get a resolution, even if you're just a victim of like a use of force. But we're the victim of like thousands of probing uses of force every day, right? And I'm sure Cyber Command knows this, and obviously it's not a classified discussion, but I think it's fair to say we have thousands a day, so we can't respond to all those. And that's intentional, this sort of invitation to struggle. We only are going to respond to armed attacks or let countries respond to them legally. And I think that works. But what's frustrating is other folks use that gap, what's called the gap legally, to their advantage. And they're exploiting what Mike Schmidt calls the gray zones. And a lot of other folks have talked about that too, and Gary Korn mentioned. But things can change and move very quickly in computing, obviously. I'm not a technical person, but they can move very quickly. Does that change our concept of imminence or, or everything on the battlefield, targeting? And I think the answer is no. I think our principles, not just of how we get to war through the UN Charter, but once we're in a conflict of targeting, work. You must distinguish between military and civilian, right? It has to be, proportionality has to be considered. And there's a big, long definition of that. It's not your classic eye for an eye. If you go to the NATO CCD COE website, which is, a Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, our NATO counterparts, you'll see the Cyber Law Toolkit. So this is a project we worked on for a year or two, and some real great leaders in that. Exeter was part of it, and some other great universities. For practitioners, so if you have a question on cyber law, you don't have to do all the research. It's right there. If you're advising a state, if you have an election issue, if you have an attack issue, if you have a power grid issue, what can your response be? Go to this toolkit. Again, you're not the decision maker. As lawyers, we're just advisors. But it's nice to know you have this toolkit to go look at and see the law very quickly in a particular area and be able to advise, whether it's a commander or a politician or a leader or someone like that.
So you mentioned that you're an instructor at West Point in the law department. With ACI, I know we've tried incorporating cyber into a lot of the different academic disciplines at West Point to include electives in cyber law and policy. And how do you feel those are being incorporated into the cadets' education? Yeah,
great question. Very well. I mean, we're a little behind and we're catching up fast. So we had 41 cadets this year take cyber law, not just a cyber major or computer science. There's a lot of great students in those classes. I'm talking cyber law. So we built that in the last year or so, and they're doing, the standard law of war I just talked about, which is the Talon manual and some things that are, again, too long to get into here. But
that's a lot to touch, actually. I was going to say it's a lot of stuff they're learning, but I'm sure it's incredibly valuable for where we need these future leaders to go in the Army, even if they just take that stuff that they learned in cyber law and apply it to their everyday military life, and even when they if they transition into the civilian sector.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it applies. I mean, they're bringing issues to class and saying, what about this and what about that? Things they read, or even just privacy, security of their social media accounts. Or, hey, someone was listening in on my car the other day, like when I was driving and talking to my girlfriend, I think one of my students said. I swear, the car was listening to me, and then when I got back home, Alexa ordered something that I had talked about in the car.
Yeah, I've had things like that happen. I'm like, it's a little freaky. I know my phone is listening.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm just thrilled that they're
thinking about it.
Right. We're getting there. We are very pleased with what we've done to integrate cyber throughout the curriculum. The dean's been great, Soup, supporting us. And so I think it's working. And yeah, mine is just a little tiny role with the law department.
Well, thank you again very much, Rob, for
Thank you, Lisa.
coming and talking with us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next time on Think Tank.
The way I came into this internship is because I've had West Point in my life for a long time. And from there, I thought West Point was going to have something having to do in cybersecurity, which is my major. So I looked it up and I found it.
Thank you for joining us.